My name is Theo Chino and I am a Bitcoin activist. I want to raise awareness about the fight in the state of New York against the BitLicense, an illegal Bitcoin regulation enacted in 2015. 5 years ago, I started a small Bitcoin processing business which operated about 150 stores in uptown Manhattan and in the Bronx. In New York State, there is a 90-day window to challenge any regulation once it takes effect. I did challenge the BitLicense in October 2015. Bitcoin is an intangible commodity, and therefore Benjamin Losky did not have the constitutional power to regulate. After 2 years of legal back and forth, 2 hearings took place with 2 different judges. On December 21st, our new judge, without reading the document, dismissed the lawsuit, arguing that I wasn't authorized to sue. Because he also meant that any startup in any industry could never challenge an overzealous and corrupt regulator. This is also a very dangerous precedent for all industry doing business in New York State or with any New York State resident regardless of where the company is located. We need to appeal this bad decision, and for that we need to raise about $150,000 by February 1st. That is about 15 Bitcoin. The Bitcoin Foundation has set up a special address where Bitcoiner can send donation. If you are using cryptos like Zcash, Ethereum and Litecoin, you will need to convert them to Bitcoin. I have reached to those foundations and I'm still waiting to hear from them. This is not an easy case. Cronism in plain sight, with Benjamin Losky becoming a consultant in the industry that he decimated with the regulation he created. The unjust targeting of local Bitcoin traders by the Department of Justice like Buck Wagner from Colorado, Thomas Costanzo of Arizona, or Sal Manzi in Maine. These are the more reason to fight. We must educate lawmakers that Bitcoiners are not crooks. Before we can do that, we need to have the court invalidate the BitLicense as unconstitutional. That is what the court are there for anyway. There are those who believe they are safe because they live outside New York State. Let me tell you, the New York BitLicense is coming everywhere thanks to the hard work of the Coin Center, the Chamber of Digital Commerce, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who together lobbied the Uniform Law Commission, who created the Virtual Currency Act. That act is much worse legislation than the New York BitLicense. The first bill has already been introduced in the state of Nebraska by Senator Schumacher and in the state of Hawaii by Senator Gabbard. We must fight. We must apply pressure. One thing I do not have is the money to continue paying my lawyer. I have until February 15 to submit my decision of appealing. I cannot do it without the community. You can donate Bitcoin or you can use your Visa MasterCard directly on my Meetup page. I have posted all the information on the link below. We are actually winning this fight. We are actually winning this fight, and the tide is really turning, but we need to apply some real pressure. Please support my lawsuit. Please donate. Thank you.
Minded individual put in your brain propaganda, and I commend my friend over here, Theo. I commend Theo, and no one of these people have $50 million Bitcoin business, and they didn't give this guy $1, and he's over there fighting them himself, right there in the courthouse for the BitLicense. And you got thousands of Bitcoin companies around the country and the world should be giving the money to Theo's lawyer. But Theo, he's putting every dollar, I don't know what he sold, to be able to make this lawsuit happen. And everyone should hang their heads low if they're not donating to Theo. I'm sorry about all that.
Hi, my name is Theo Chino. I have a bank in a garage, and I heard your comment about a bank in a garage. And
Some people wouldn't like that comment.
Well, the thing is, it's in the garage. I would prefer it to be in Wall Street or anywhere else, but you have to start in the technology world in the garage, like HP, like many other. Like Ponzi, too, I guess. It started in a garage. But that hasn't prevented...
Did you say Fonzie?
Ponzi.
Ponzi.
That hasn't prevented other guy to have 60 years later to pull the same trick. So what is the DFS going to do to allow people to start bank in the garage with the technological, get insurance, get other things
than make a deal with the bank, because the way I read the reg right now is bank in the garage need to make a deal with big bank. And if you cannot make a deal with big bank, DFS will not give a bid license. And the bid license are too broad from what I read, where there is not a clear definition of what bank in the garage need to accomplish to get a bid license. So is the DFS going to work much more on a progressive system that will allow the big bank, the bank in the garage, or whoever else to foster in New York State to make sure New York State residents are not trickled by the bank in the garage with a Ponzi scheme idea?
Right. So hopefully there won't be any Ponzi scheme ideas. But look, you're asking, implicit in your question is you're asking that fundamental, I think one of the hardest questions we face, which is what do we do about compliance costs? And the compliance costs, if they're too burdensome, if it's all too technical, if it's just too much, how is a startup with 3 buddies in a garage with a great idea, or in a basement, let's say, going to get off the ground if they face this enormous initial hurdle to move forward and get a license and to operate in, what I consider to be the greatest financial center in the world? And the answer is, I punted on it in the speech, and I think it's probably the toughest question we face, because we want to make sure that even if you're startup, you're doing certain things, because as we know, if there's an area of the market that goes unregulated or is very lightly regulated, it can, not always, but it can become sort of a dark corner where a lot of things we don't want to see happen. And those who want to aid terrorists and send money around the globe and engage in money laundering or sell drugs, or you choose your illicit activity, often flow to those dark corners. So we want to make sure there's enough regulation in place to prevent that from happening, but at the same time have it be not overly burdensome. And I didn't get into it in the speech, but we've had some very good proposals from some of the commentators who have submitted them to us about maybe a tiered approach or a safe harbor approach, and we're working through that, and we're just not there yet. So I wasn't prepared today to tell you how we're going to do that, but I commit to you that we're going to try and do it in as thoughtful and careful a way as possible, because it goes back to that collision I started with, which is when you start engaging in banking activities, there's a reason there are tight regulations, because it's a lot of potential for a lot of bad problems, even at our largest institutions. At the same time, the tech world is changing the face of banking as we know it, a lot of the times for the better, and it's doing it in profound ways. And it's often driven by this technological innovation, often coming from startups, which start small. And we face this issue somewhat with our smaller banks, frankly. We have everyone knows the J.P. Morgans and the Citis and the Wells Fargos of the world here in New York. But in New York State, we regulate the whole state. We have 70, 80 banks in upstate New York, many of which are tiny. And when Dodd-Frank got passed, they had a huge problem, because the potential compliance costs from Dodd-Frank could put some of them out of business. And I remember sitting with certain CEOs when I first got this job from those banks saying, and now I'm in a position where I'm going to have 3 loan officers and 10 compliance officers. And I looked at the CEO and said, well, that's not a business model that will work. They said, I know, that's why I'm here to see you. And so that we worked that out over time. And it was hard, and it actually required us to spend a lot of time in Washington dealing with how we draw those final regs for Dodd-Frank in certain ways that don't crush our community banks upstate. It's sort of a similar endeavor, and that's what we're wrestling with. Of course. Yeah, that's what we're here for. And and I don't mean that facetiously. There's a whole group of about 15 DFS people here tonight in these first couple of rows, and they spend a lot of time talking to companies and startups and other people who want to get off the ground. We have other people who spend a lot of time talking to community banks and big banks, and a lot of what we do is not enforcement, it's sort of prudential regulation. We want the banking sector to succeed in New York as much as possible. We want new companies, new tech companies succeeding in New York as much as possible. So I have no hesitation answering your question, yes.
Certainly, in my view, cryptocurrencies are not currencies. Sorry to be provoking you a little bit. I mean, perhaps they are digital assets, but they're not currencies.
Yeah, hi. My name is Tiochino. I am a computer engineer since 1984. I'm the first panhandler of the internet in 95. I broke the internet, was part of the Alternet movement on IRC 96 and 97, I forgot. I am part of VFA. I'm a co-founder of a New York City privacy advocate group. We're part of VFA. And I also a political activist and a computer activist. I discovered Bitcoin in 2013, and the New York State has been putting a bit license over New York State, and EFA came very strongly against the bit license, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
In 2000, the same year, California tried to do that the right way, through the legislature, with AB 216, I believe. You came against that, and I applaud you for that. However, there is a little backroom deal that happened with the Uniform Law Commission, where they met in San Diego this year, and they approved a bid license that will be presented to every legislature across the United States. That bid license, or whatever version, EFF participated in the drafting of that regulation. Other people, tacitly, because in politics you know that perception is everything, is using your name to kind of say that they had their support to get these things passed. Is EFF strongly going to come out and denounce that ULC bid license version that is Wall Street protecting Wall Street? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So take a moment to say where we're at. Indeed, we came out strongly against the New York bit license bill and in the California version. And we continue to believe that it is too early to regulate Bitcoin or similar virtual currencies. That it needs to have a breathing space to allow for innovation. We did provide some commentary to the National Conference of Commissioners for Uniform State Laws, or NCUSL, as they were working on their draft bill. Just a moment to explain what that is. This is a group that proposes state laws, and they would like to make it a uniform law so that every state has the same law. Which is not a terrible process in and of itself. That, like, if you want to have the law be the same, it enables more people to do business across different states. It's very awkward if the law changes from state to state in particular. So, nevertheless, we have concerns about this, and we raised those concerns in a series of letters to the drafters of this bill. Now we've known Theo for a long time and have a bit of history here, and he has been pushing for us to refute an implication that another organization may have done, which I'm not sure that is an accurate view of what that organization has done. But what we do not support the laws is. They didn't take our recommendations for fixes. And we continue to believe that it is overall too early to have a regulated space right now.
And would you put it on paper so we can see it on the website and we can use it as activists to say you denounce it or whatever?
So I mean, one of the things that comes up from time to time is that we have people who are very passionate about a particular issue, and they write us, they email, they call, and they want us to do a particular thing. And we can't do that for everybody who contacts us, even though they feel very passionately about the subject. So we have written some letters to NCUSL. We may decide to take further action if the situation warrants it, but I can't promise you here and now what we're going to do in that issue. If we see a need, we will take action, but we may not feel as much of a need as you feel.
Can I say one word just after that?
Please.
In some respects, this is a dream come true of mine, because in the EFA are a legion of voices. It is a chorus, and in a chorus are distinct voices that hopefully find some harmony, right? And allies are people with whom you will occasionally disagree, right? That's what an ally is. If you didn't ever disagree, they wouldn't just be your ally, you'd be like locked together, right? So there are opportunities for, particularly at the tactical level, constructive tension in strategies. And we welcome EFA groups, or any of you, claiming visionary space that might be in a position or a place or an arena that we're not active, right? That's part of the opportunity, and I do want to applaud NYC Privacy Advocates, the group that Theo helped founded, is a perfect example of this. They're championing the creation in New York City of a public office for a privacy advocate, and that's not something that EFF particularly asked to do or is even vocal about, but you're pushing at the vanguard, and that is the opportunity that's available to all of you, and that's one that we applaud, and we want to see more of you doing exactly that.
Thank you.